You ever smelled a rotting corpse while trying to finish what's left of your lasagna on a Tuesday night? If not, congratulations, you lucky mother. Sorry. It was supposed to be a normal night after work. I was just finishing up eating so I could hop on my PC and finish up a few runs on Borderlands 4 before I had to go to sleep. Never did find that unkempt Harold. Sorry, I'm rambling. I didn't take the emergency alerts seriously. It doesn't honestly seem like anyone did, judging by the absolute hellhole that was waiting for me outside my house when I was finally brave enough to go outside. The screaming and tearing sounds, as well as the slurping of wet flesh, deterred me for a while. But things eventually quieted down, and I decided enough time had passed. Blood was all over my windows as I approached the front door. Smeared handprints, a chunk of someone's arm? I don't know, fucking skin. Bodies littered my neighborhood. Adam Johnson from next door was torn in two. Chest and head on the porch, guts trailing down his front porch steps. His legs were on the walkway leading to his house. Pieces were missing, bites taken out, flesh and muscle peeled from bone. I only glimpsed his way for a few seconds. His front door stood open. Blood trailed out. Or in? I wonder what became of his wife and kids. I didn't go looking. Just gonna get that out of the way now. Maybe that makes me a coward. Actually, no, it definitely makes me a coward. But if you saw what was left of Adam, you wouldn't have gone looking either. At least I don't think you would. Maybe you would have. Who knows? The smell was getting stronger. Not just around Adam's house, everywhere. I don't know if you've ever had a mouse die on your walls before. Happened to me once. Took 3 days to find the thing. Thought I was gonna have to move. This was worse. Way worse. Like that smell had somehow spread across the entire neighborhood. I remember pulling my shirt up over my nose. Didn't help. I still did it. People always do that in movies. Not sure why. If a smell can make it through the air, it's probably making it through a t-shirt. Sorry, rambling again. I looked up and down the street. Nothing moved, no cars, no people, no dogs. Actually, that's not true. There was a dog. Miss Porter's little white terrier. I don't remember its name. The thing hated me. Every time I checked my mail, it would lose its mind through the fence. Now it was just sitting in the middle of the road, staring, not at me, at something further down the street. I followed its gaze. Didn't see anything. The dog took off a few seconds later. Just ran. Full speed. I didn't see it again. The emergency alert was still sitting on my phone. The screen kept dimming every few seconds. I'd tap it, read the same thing, lock the phone, then immediately pull it back out and read it again. Like the message was gonna change. Remain indoors. No shit. A little late for that. The battery was down to 18%. I remembered that because I got annoyed. The world was apparently ending, and I was still worried about charging my phone. Human beings are weird. I finally stepped off my driveway. The sound my shoe made nearly gave me a heart attack. Just a wet squish. That's it, but everything was so quiet, it sounded loud. I stopped, waited. Nothing. Then I took another step. And another. I passed the Johnson house. Didn't look. Okay, that's a lie. I absolutely looked, just not for long. Long enough to confirm Adam was still there. Long enough to wish I hadn't looked. Then I kept moving. I don't know why I picked the end of the street. Maybe because it was something to do. Maybe because sitting in my house, waiting, didn't seem much better. Maybe because if I stayed there any longer, I'd start thinking. Really thinking. And I was trying very hard not to do that. The Miller house was next. Halloween decorations were still up. Plastic skeleton hanging from the tree. Fake tombstones, one of those inflatable pumpkins. The pumpkin had fallen over. The little fan inside it was still running. You could hear it buzzing. Bzzz, bzzz, bzzz. I stood there listening to it for a second. I don't know why, maybe because it was normal. The whole neighborhood looked like somebody had taken normal and beaten it to death. But little pieces were still hanging around. A pumpkin fan, a porch light, a parked bicycle. Stupid stuff. The stuff that made everything feel wrong. I was maybe halfway down the street when I noticed all the garage doors. Most of them were open. Not all of them, but just enough. I don't know why that bothered me, but it did. Some were completely open, some halfway, and one looked like it had stopped while closing. I remember thinking everybody must have left in a hurry. Then I looked at all the cars still sitting in the driveways, and that thought didn't last long. A flagpole somewhere clinked against metal. A bird landed on a roof. The inflatable pumpkin buzzed behind me. And that was it. That was the entire soundtrack of the apocalypse. At least where I was standing. I got about 3 houses from the corner before I realized I was holding my breath. I let it out. Took another. Then another. The stop sign at the end of the street was finally close enough to read. There was a flyer taped to it, some local church thing. Community barbecue, Saturday at 6. Food, games, family fun. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, just because it felt ridiculous. Family fun. Adam Johnson was in pieces 20 yards behind me. The world had apparently lost its damn mind, and somebody had spent $5 printing barbecue flyers. The corner was right there, maybe 30 feet, 40. I don't know, not far. Close enough that I remember thinking, okay, just get to the corner, then figure out what comes next, because that's how small my plans had become. Not survive, not get help, not save anybody. Just get to the corner, one thing at a time. And for the first time since I'd stepped outside, I started to realize something. The screaming had stopped. Completely, not faded, stopped. No distant cries, no shouting, nothing. I don't know why that scared me more, but it did. A lot more. So I walked a little faster. Not running, not yet, just enough to pretend I wasn't scared. and slow enough that if something happened, I don't know, maybe I'd see it first. Maybe that's what I was telling myself. I reached the corner a minute later, and that's when I noticed the blood. Not on my street, but on the next one. I looked at the streets to my left and right. Both had blood streaks, bloody footprints, and bits of body strewn about. I remember thinking to myself, was my street the luckiest one? The pavement remained relatively clean, as if some force had spared me the worst of it. A patch of woods stood against the opposite side of me. I'd never really given it much thought before now. Just a sound barrier, I thought. Something to keep traffic noise low and property value up. I stood there for a moment, trying to figure out which direction to go, the emergency alert continuing to plague my thoughts. Stay inside. What was all of this? An attack? A government experiment gone wrong? Aliens? The absurdity of it made me chuckle very grimly to myself. A soft breeze blew against my skin, blowing away the stench of blood for a moment, before flooding my nostrils again. Without another thought, I turned left, following the wind in hopes to keep the smell at bay, but to no avail. The blood got worse the farther I walked, not dramatically, just more, like somebody had taken a bucket and sloshed it across the pavement every 20 feet. Footprints, too. Some barefoot, some not. I tried not to think about that. The barefoot ones, I mean. Something about them bothered me. Shoes get lost. People lose shoes all the time. Bare footprints meant somebody kept going without them. I don't know why that stuck with me. It just did. A bicycle lay in somebody's yard. Front wheel still spinning, at least I think it was. Maybe my brain made that part up. Memory gets weird after something like this. I do remember baseball cards, though. Those were definitely real. Hundreds of them, scattered all over a driveway. Rain had plastered most of them to the concrete. A few were still tumbling around whenever the wind picked up. Some kid was probably devastated, assuming... No, never mind. I don't like where that thought goes. The emergency alert buzzed again. I almost threw my phone. Same message. Same stupid fucking message. Stay inside. The battery was down to 16% now. I remember that because it somehow felt more important than corpses. Sorry, not more important. That's not what I mean. More manageable. I couldn't do anything about the bodies. Could save my battery. See, human beings are weird. A car sat crooked in the middle of the road ahead. Engine still running. Driver's door hanging open. One headlight was out. The other was shining into someone's front yard. I stood there, staring at it for a minute, waiting. I don't know for what. Maybe for the driver to come back. Maybe for somebody to yell at me. Maybe for literally anything that made sense. Nothing happened. The engine just idled. Tick, tick, tick. The turn signal was still on. Blink, blink, blink. That sound followed me for half the block. I hated it. The neighborhood wasn't completely empty. Not exactly. I saw curtains move a couple of times. Could have been people. Could have been the wind. I never found out. One house had television on. Blue light flickering behind closed blinds. Another had music playing somewhere inside. Real faint. Country music. The kind my dad used to listen to. I actually stopped and listened to it for a second. Not because I liked it, but because hearing something felt normal. Important. Like proof the world hadn't completely fallen apart yet. The song ended and nobody put anything back on. The silence afterward was somehow worse. I kept walking. The woods stayed on my right. Just trees, nothing special. I had driven past them thousands of times, never once wondering what was in there. Now, I found myself looking between the trunks every few seconds, not because I thought something was watching me. I didn't. Not yet, anyway. I think I was just looking for people. Anybody. A police officer. A firefighter. Some guy walking his dog. Anybody who could explain what the hell was happening. Instead, I found a shopping cart. Halfway inside the tree line, just sitting there. I don't know why that bothered me either. Maybe because it shouldn't have been there. Somebody had to push it all the way from the grocery store, which meant somebody had a reason, or maybe they didn't. Maybe that's worse. I was about to keep walking when I heard a voice, a real one, not screaming, not crying, just talking. I froze. The voice came from one of the houses across the street. I couldn't make out the words, just someone talking. Then a voice answered, then another. I remember feeling relieved, actually relieved. Finally, people, normal people. I started toward the house before I stopped myself because something felt off. Not scary, just off. The voices never changed volume, never moved, never paused, just the same conversation over and over, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Then I realized what I was hearing. The television. Somebody had left a TV on. And for a second there, I thought I had found someone else who was alive. Funny, right? Not really, but I laughed anyway. A little. Then I kept walking. Because standing around listening to someone else's TV wasn't exactly a plan. And at that moment, I really needed a plan. Even if I had absolutely no idea what that plan was supposed to be. The only plan I could think of in that moment was to head to the larger metropolitan area. My home was nestled in a cozy pocket of tranquility 2 miles outside of Hardwick. I needed to find people. I needed to know what the hell was going on. I had tried calling 911 for the 5th time that evening, but no dice. It seemed emergency services were either overloaded or no one was around to answer phones, just endless ringing. I picked up my pace a little as the lack of people was deeply unsettling. For a place that was usually lively and sprawling with people, it currently reminded me of a ghost town. As I rounded a slight bend in the road, I caught the faint flash of red and blues. A cop, I thought. Someone who could help me. Someone to explain what exactly was going on. Sure, I'd probably be in trouble for not listening to the emergency alert, but at that point I didn't really care. I went from a brisk walk to a very quick jog. I needed to reach someone. Anyone. The night so far had felt like a really shitty dream. I just needed to wake up from. And before you suggest pinching myself, yeah, I already tried that. It didn't work. As I neared the flashing lights, I realized an ambulance and cop car had collided head-on into each other. The back door of the ambulance was ajar, blood running out and down the bumper into the street. Almost pouring? I didn't want to see what was in there. I slowly made my way up the side of the ambulance, glass crunching under my feet. The smell of smoke and blood mixed into an incredibly noxious odor. My stomach turned in an instant, and I threw up on the side of the ambulance. That definitely didn't help the smell. I finally made it to the front to find the cop had been ejected from his car and smashed through the windshield of the ambulance. His body was completely wrecked in ways I didn't know were possible. What was left of his head didn't have a face. He had been chewed on. The ambulance driver and the partner were missing from the cab. I shuddered to think what surprise awaited whoever opened the back of that ambulance. There was no radio chatter, just static. I glanced around to nearby houses. The same scenes plagued this street as it did mine. Blood, bodies, death. I stumbled to the curb and sat, my head spinning. I needed a moment to gather my thoughts. The trek from my house to this ambulance had only taken about 20 minutes. If this could happen in only a few hours since the first emergency alert went out, then what was happening everywhere else? I turned toward the general direction of Hardwick. All was quiet. Too quiet. For the first time since leaving my house, I just listened. No birds, no crickets, no planes, no cars. No life at all. What the fuck was happening? As if the universe itself was throwing me a bone, I heard a faint noise. A radio. I jumped to my feet and walked toward the noise, driven by blind motivation. I walked to a car, a convertible red Mustang, at least I thought it was red. It was hard to tell as every inch was dripping with blood. Every inch. I found myself chuckling again. Crowd eater. I bent down to listen as the radio cut in and out. A news report of some kind. My blood ran cold as one thing came through, crystal clear. When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.